Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Facebook Live chat. We will be hosting these sessions every Friday at 10 a.m. to discuss some of the common themes caregivers are experiencing through the pandemic. Today, we are planning to spend about 20 or 30 minutes on the topic of technology, and we invite you to ask questions in the comment section of this video, and we'll do our best to answer as we go. My name is Miranda, and I am one of the registered social workers on the Society support team.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Cindy Bond at Community Education with the Alzheimer Society.
Great. So we really wanted to talk about technology today, which we briefly mentioned last week in our session about safety. What I'd really like to start off by saying is that just because a person has received a diagnosis of dementia doesn't mean that their independence needs to be taken away. It just means that there are some safety concerns that we need to be monitoring throughout the journey.
Yes, very true. And not just safety. I think we're going to certainly touch on safety today, but just technology devices or devices out there, even adaptive aids that can help somebody, anyone, live independently as long as possible. So we're going to talk about safety technology, but everyday technology too.
Right. And that's technology can really help compensate for some of the challenges that a person living with dementia might experience, whether they're living on their own or they're living with a caregiver or even in a care home.
Right. So we've got lots to talk about in very limited time. So please post your questions, but we're going to talk, like Miranda said, very general technology in terms of safety, but adaptive aids. And that makes me think about, first thing that comes to mind is safety around the stove. So there is some technology for that, isn't there, Miranda?
Yes, there is. And it really, there's a few different ideas around cooking and safety, which is something we hear a lot about. I think that's often one of the things that someone new in the journey thinks about as well. You always hear stories about people leaving pots on the stove and burning rice or whatever it might be. But there is a device, and we will link all of the things we talk about in the comment section after this video. But the one that I found relatively recently is what's called the iGuard stove. It is quite expensive in price, but you install it into your stove and it has all these sensors. You can get all sorts of different versions of it. And the sensors will turn off the stove if it's been left on too long, all sorts of different things. I believe it is up near the $500 or $600 price, which of course is going to be outside of the means of some people. So that's to keep in mind there.
So definitely there's for other types of appliances in the kitchen, thinking automatic shutoffs. I'm thinking kettles where they automatically shut off. I know we have one at the office. They're not expensive at all. And when we talk about safety, certainly you can reach out to us about strategies beyond technology, but for today, we're just going to talk about the technology.
Right.
Another big technology for keeping your person safe, or for yourself if you're watching, is the GPS. There's lots of different kinds out there now.
Yeah, there's a plethora of GPS devices. Many of them also come with fall detection as well. You can get 2-in-1 devices. But the point of a GPS is really just to mitigate a potential crisis, right? If your person were to leave the home and become lost, you would be able to quickly find them. And even with the devices that have two-way calling, you may be able to message them, or if they did become lost, there are certain devices where it'll send a message to, say, 5 different people, right? And you can make 911 one of those people that receives a message. Yeah, so
they've come a long way.
They really have.
Right.
There's a lot of telephone companies that also have their own versions, such as I know TELUS has one, but there's
Yeah.
private companies as well.
Even iPhone has a GPS tracker capability. So, just starting out, if you already have an iPhone, that's an app you can download. And I believe it's free. There's also
Yeah.
watches with GPS, insoles for shoes, little pocket GPSs, all kinds of, yeah.
Right.
We're
Now,
not shipping
one,
people yet, though.
I'm sorry?
We're not shipping people. I know that's always a question. When are we going to do that? I don't know. I can't answer that. But until
Yeah.
that happens, we have other tracking devices.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know when I talk to caregivers, often one of the worries is that their person either doesn't carry their phone with them, so they can't use the iPhone system, or they would refuse to wear the watch GPS or the little pocket one. That might not be something they grab when they're leaving the home, which is not particularly helpful if you have the device, but it's not being used. So there's through Medic Alert Canada, there's a program called Safely Home, which you can register your person for. Here in Calgary, we don't have a vulnerable persons registry anymore. So Safely Home is a good alternative. They share information with emergency services. So if your person were to become lost, you can phone emergency services, let them know that you have this membership with Safely Home, and they'll have access to information about your person, common places they might go, what they look like, all those details. So it kind of saves you a step.
Mm-hmm. Same kind of idea, only there's no registry with it, which is road ID. Yeah. So I think it was designed for runners initially, and cyclists, but excuse me, comes in a multitude of designs. You write on it what you want. It can say supporting somebody with memory loss, because I really like the idea of caregivers wearing or having ID on them as well, saying that they're supporting somebody with memory loss or dementia or Alzheimer's, whatever they're comfortable with. So if something were to happen to them, right,
they're easily identified as being a caregiver.
Right. We'll look for that person. Exactly.
Right. Well, along with that, I know there's one family that I know of that when they go out, typically outside of a pandemic, if they were to go to the mall or something, they would use their camera on their phone and take a photo of their person. Maybe use an excuse such as, "Oh, the flowers look nice. I just want to take a photo of you." And that way, if the person were to get separated, they have a picture of the person, what they look like today, what they're wearing, etc. So that's a really interesting way to use technology as a preventative measure as well.
And so easy, just so easy. Even before they go for a walk outside the home, snap, take a quick thing. Yeah. Then you know exactly what they're wearing. You don't have to remember that part.
Right. And so using technology. Yeah, exactly. Using technology in ways that you may not have thought to use it before.
Yeah, just expanding, getting creative, always monitoring for changes. That's the key. What would work for one person might not work for another person. So, and it's because the disease is progressive, you have to constantly monitor for changes.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really important. For staying at home, especially during times of isolation, your person could be living independently or not. Maybe you're living with them, but getting a remote control for the television to use is so important. It's such a simple thing, but it allows for people living independently, especially living independently, to access entertainment, the news. It's a way for them to connect, even though it's virtually. So that's
Yeah.
important too.
And that's a call I get a lot, right? I'm having to run over to my mom's house because she can't get the TV working, right? So the remote that you're talking about, there's one on the Alzheimer Store of Canada, which again, I'll link below after the video. And it just has limited buttons, right? So it has the volume, the channel, and the power button, for example. So it's a little bit easier to focus on. Depending on your person, that might be a good alternative. If you don't want to buy a new remote, I've heard of people taping off all the extra buttons, right? And only leaving the necessary buttons visible.
Yeah, that's an option as well. There's not that we're, promoting one business over another, but it's just that we're familiar because of our own research. The Alzheimer's store has a really cool radio that's easy to use as well. We have one at the office. I wish I had a picture of it. But you just kind of lift it. It looks old, and you lift the lid and it turns on.
Right. And you can program it with music that your person enjoyed.
Yeah.
Right.
Very, very easy to use.
Yeah. Well, and those are the types of things that are going to help your person stay engaged in the home, be able to use devices to access, like you said, entertainment, hopefully a little bit easier than some of the more challenging devices that have come out in the last few years, right?
Yes.
That are harder to learn.
Yes. But that's a good point, Miranda, that I think, I know people with Alzheimer's can learn if it's repeated over and over. So will they eventually lose that memory? Yes. But, if you start early, preferably before diagnosis even, because we hear that a lot too. I suspected things have been going on for quite some time. So introducing some technology before the person needs to become dependent on it can be helpful and incorporate part of their routine, right?
Absolutely. Those devices also have less steps, right? So even if your person still maybe couldn't operate that remote or use the music radio, it might be easier to talk them through that over the phone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Because it's shorter steps.
There's less steps. Yeah.
I know, talking about going back to GPS and walking, exercise is so important for the person to maintain their independence, their mobility. It's good for their heart, so it's good for their brain. So one thing we've adapted and put on our website that caregivers have access to is a pre-plan for a safe return. And essentially all it is a bunch of questions for the caregiver to answer, but hang on to, put in a safe place where they can access it if their person, in the event that they do wander and get lost. So that's a pre-plan for a safe return. Some of the questions, obviously, you can't answer right away, like what was your person wearing? But if you have a photo, that's perfect.
Right. Well, and along that, technology is great, but you do need to have a plan along with it, right?
Yes.
If you see your person's left the house because you have a GPS, but you're at work, do you have a plan of who's going to be able to go pick them up? Right.
Yes.
So thinking ahead, it's not just technology, it's how are you going to use it in a positive way?
That's especially true with installing cameras. There's many cameras, right? And we have this discussion with caregivers as well as, it definitely is an invasion of privacy, and it's, weighing that against the person's safety and their strong desire, perhaps, that they've communicated to the caregiver that they want to stay in their home as long as possible. So having those discussions early about cameras is important, I think. And it really speaks to your plan. If you see something happen and you're at work or you're at the other end of the city, plan for that. What are you going to do? Who could you call that perhaps is closer? So Yeah, cameras are great, but there's lots to consider as well.
There is, as well as consent, right? If your person does not have a personal directive that's enacted, you do need their consent to place cameras in their home. Or like you said, if you've already talked about it before and you've had their consent along the journey. There's also another thing that I'd really like caregivers to consider when they're debating putting cameras in the home is the impact that it'll have on you as a caregiver, right? So there's all sorts of different cameras, some that give you a notification every time your person walks by it. And that can be a real contributor to caregiver burnout, right? If you're constantly checking your phone and seeing what your person's doing. So I would encourage caregivers to set up some boundaries for themselves, right? Depending on the situation, of course. Maybe you're checking the camera between 6 and 7 at night because you want to make sure your person's had something to eat, or you just quickly play back the day scrolling through just to check in. I know some caregivers that I talk to will turn off those notifications and choose not to look while a caregiver's in the home. It's a chance for them to have some respite from the cameras. Alternatively, one caregiver I speak to puts her cameras facing the doors, so that way she knows if her person has left the house. Right? That way they still have privacy in what they're doing, but she knows if they're leaving the home.
Yes, yes. I had a client one time who was suspicious and was saying that the neighbors in the apartment complex were stealing from her. So the son put a camera facing the door as well and played it back to reassure mom that, no, your money's safe. We have it in a lockbox. You have your own key. No one came in. So let's go find the box. And it was just reassuring as well, which again allowed her to stay in her apartment independently and safely.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for some people that might be really reassuring, knowing that their children have eyes in the house and are keeping a good watchful eye and to make sure that they're safe.
There's lots to consider with technology. Again,
there is.
For the changes and the stress.
Absolutely. I'd like to just backtrack because we do have a question about those bracelets.
Okay.
So how would I get my dad to wear the bracelet? We're talking about maybe GPS or medical alerts or road ID even.
I love the idea. There's always one member in the family that is the golden person. They can do no wrong. They're somewhat idolized. It could be a grandchild. It could be a son, a daughter, an aunt. It could be a wife. Somebody like that, giving it as a gift and actually putting it on the person. Now, if it's a couple, I like the idea, like I said, 2 bracelets.
And you both wear one.
Anything happens to the caregiver. And medical alert, like some of them are very dressy and ornate. So road ID is very sporty, if you will, but there's necklaces as well. So yeah, giving it as a gift, I would say. And
yeah, I think also maybe also taking the focus off of a cognitive decline, right? So you're saying maybe it's for a list of your medications, right? So you're taking the focus off the cognitive decline, which we know many people living with dementia will lack insight to their changing abilities, right? So that might be where some of the resistance comes from.
Yes. And that's a good point. Many people with a diagnosis, even in middle stage, can still read quite fine. So having a trigger word like Alzheimer's could be having a negative impact. So, but I've heard so many different stories. Some people are okay with the word Alzheimer's, but not dementia. Some people are okay with memory loss and not Alzheimer's. So yeah, who is your person? But
And you, as the care partner, you're the expert on your person. It's all about finding a hook, right? What's going to be believable to them,
yes,
but still accomplish what you need to get accomplished.
Yeah.
Where possible.
There is a clasp. I just want to mention there's a clasp on Medical Alert where it's 2 U's. They're shaped like U's. And the way to interconnect them, you can get it off for sure, but it's a little bit more challenging. So that can be helpful as well. So they keep it on, especially if they've never worn a bracelet before and they're not used to it. They can want to take that off. So
yeah,
habit, right? It's a routine to start over again.
Yeah. So speaking of being outside, another one that I hear a lot is car safety.
Oh yeah.
So I know
Yes.
when we're talking, maybe particularly if the person's sitting in the front seat and they get agitated or whatever that looks like for the family, right?
Yeah.
There's ways to use technology in a positive way to maybe help reduce that anxiety. So it could be playing music in the car, right? Songs from their 20s or 30s that'll inspire them to be happy and calm and reminisce. Alternatively, can they use an iPad in the car, right? If that's not going to impact some people get nauseous, right, when you're looking at screens in the car. So again, it's very person-centered. But that's some ideas. I know yesterday you were also talking about the seatbelts and people wanting to unplug their seatbelt. You had an idea around that, I believe.
Yeah, so we're very fortunate. We have a group of ladies that make lap blankets for us and or fidget blankets. Some of you are familiar with that term, but also a muff. So it's like the old skating muffs. So you put your hands in it. So I've heard caregivers will actually put that over the seatbelt clasp so that the person, at least it gives the caregiver time to pull over to the side of the road if they see their person fidgeting. But a lot of times for the person, again, it depends on the person, they don't see the clasp. They just kind of, okay, I'm just going to sit here. So for people that want to elope from the car while you're driving, that's very scary. So sitting in the back seat or that muff, I know for one caregiver, she said it was a godsend because their person just didn't see the clasp and they were fine to sit there for the whole trip. So
we did actually just get a question about that. What if you're worried that your person will try to open the car door while you're driving? And I think the back seat is an option. I know many cars have child locks on the back so that you can't actually open it from the interior.
Yeah.
Sitting in the back seat can also be really good for people who there's a lot to see in the front seat. You have a giant window in front of you. You're seeing cars, lights, sounds. It can be very overstimulating. So the back seat could be an option for that as well. Maybe they need to sit in the back seat because you have something on the front seat, right? There's a few excuses you could use as to why they might need to sit back there that day.
Yeah.
But that's one idea around if they're trying to open the door, as well as the seatbelt, right? Hopefully if they can't open their seatbelt, if they open the door, at least they can't get out as well, right? You might be able to pull over and manage the situation before it escalates too far.
Automatic locks are great now for that, right?
Yeah.
It can be very helpful.
Yeah.
Any more questions? We have a few more technologies to mention, and I know we're at 25 after already.
Oh, wow.
I know, time flies. We knew this was a big topic, so.
It certainly is. Well, there aren't any more questions at this time, but I'd just like to spend the last few minutes trying to go through some more things inside the home.
Yeah.
So things such as telephones, right? There's telephones that have the picture of, you can add maybe 6 pictures of the face of caregivers or whoever it is so that they can just press the button and use the phone without having to memorize those numbers. It's just kind of a fancy speed dial.
I wish I had one of those myself. I don't remember anyone's phone number anymore.
Who does anymore? So another idea is around medications. I hear that as a real concern. Maybe people are taking too many dosages at a time or not enough, skipping pills. There are different blister packs and pill dispensers that will do an alarm or light up when it's time to take pills, and it'll only open for that time period of when they need to be taking medications. Depending on your person as well, I've heard a lot of people using those dementia clocks. It kind of looks like an iPad screen. They're a little bit larger, and it has not only the time, but also what time of day it is. It'll say morning, afternoon, or evening, and the day of the week as well. So many people I talk to will put that near medications as a reminder for their person to take their medications appropriately.
Yeah, that's usually a concern, or it becomes a concern at some point. So technology around that, especially now when there's limited home care available for caregivers, so that can be helpful to have that dispenser. You kind of load it. It's good for the week, I believe. You load it for a week.
Yeah, I think most of them are a week.
Yeah, but initially somebody might be able to handle a blister pack quite well.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's those changes, watching for those changes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a few other things, very simple things. Anti-slip mat in the shower or tub can be very, very helpful. Preventing falls is a big thing as we get older, regardless of dementia or not. White noise machines can be very comforting.
Diffusers as well, maybe especially
Yes,
establishing a nighttime routine.
Yes, great idea. Exercise equipment, I had that on my list because, again, we want to maintain mobility. And, you know, the weather is nice now, but if you live in Calgary, you know that it can be very slippery, right? With the Chinooks heating up and cooling off. So, you know, if your person was a cyclist, getting a indoor cycle or a treadmill for inside, just to keep that mobility, keep them strong, can be very helpful.
Absolutely.
Adaptive aids for dressing as well. So I know there's one, it's a little device to help with buttons, you know, if somebody has arthritis, because a person is more than their dementia, right? They have other comorbidities that need to be taken into account.
Absolutely.
Magnifiers. There's actually a magnifier as well we always think of the little round ones.
Yeah.
Those for sure, but there's bigger ones that can go over a screen of a TV or a computer. Right. So if there's visual complications for the person, or they might need those adaptive aids as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we've hit on the big ones. This list is infinite, really. So if you're watching this and we didn't address a topic that you'd like to, that's a topic that is happening in your life, don't hesitate to call us and we'll be happy to brainstorm ideas of ways to use technology and other devices for where your person is at in their journey.
Thank you for joining us today. Next week, we're going to be talking about communication basics, and basics because it's only a half an hour or 20 minutes. So please tune in for that. If you like our videos, please like and share them. If you have any questions, please contact us. 403-290-0110. Ask to speak to either Miranda or myself, or one of our social workers would be happy to have a conversation about this topic or anything in general that you're finding challenging.
Absolutely.
Or I learned the most from other caregivers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that lived experience, definitely. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Take care and have a great weekend.